Hello, and welcome to the Mystic Feminine Fertility Podcast, a space for heart-centered conversations about menstrual cycles, fertility, and divine feminine energy. My name is Annalise Yagyajoti, and I am your host, your guide here. I am a reproductive health practitioner who specializes in cycle tracking and fertility optimization. This podcast is brought to you by my free online membership, Mystic Cycles Sisterhood, which is a chock-full resource online of PDFs and videos, and there's a Telegram group and so many beautiful things to help you connect to your cycle, connect to other women, and it's all for free. Without further ado, let's jump into today's interview. Today, our guest Treyána is a life empowerment coach and self-improvement podcast host from the Deepest Desires podcast. Her mission is to guide women through an in-between phase of life and fully transform their lives into one that provides fulfillment and empowerment. I am so excited for you to learn more about Treyána and to listen to this conversation. Treyána, where are you at in your current menstrual cycle?
So I have just had my first real period since 16 because I actually was on birth control since 16. I'm now 25, so a long time. Obviously, not there's a lot of things that have been linked to it negatively, so it's something I'm gonna have to go along with in life and figure out if any negative side effects come from it. But from 16 to 25, I got on the Depo shot, and it was just something that was beneficial for me, this entire time. I had my first partner at 16, and my parents and I had discussed it. We agreed, yeah, we don't want any pregnancies happening too early on. So I got on the Depo shot, just got off it. I had my last shot in January, and if anyone knows about the Depo, it's a 3-month cycle. So I had, it was going out of my system in April, and 6 months from April, here I am with my first period. And since 16, it's crazy to me. And I'm tracking it, just kind of getting used to my body again. The cramps were rough, but we're working through it. I had my raspberry tea, I had some heating pads, I had the travel ones too, by I don't know how to pronounce it, the brand RAEL. I don't know if that's like rail or something, but they have a travel pack, like 3-pack for like $6.99. And I was on the go during my period, and I was like, yeah, I need the heat. You just stick it to your underwear or whatever pants you're in, and it's perfect. So it helps. But I had that. I was like, I'm getting prepared for the symptoms because I haven't had it in a while.
You are ready. And when you were on the Depo, did you ever bleed?
Mhm.
Um,
No, so when you first get on it, of course, for every woman it's different, but I had spotting here and there for the first few months. Honestly, I want to say it was longer than 6 months that lasted, like it would come and go, but it wasn't like a real period. But after that, it was completely gone, which obviously not natural for the body, probably not healthy, but I loved it. I was like, I'm living life without having to worry about anything. But yeah, not really. There was really no spotting. Every now and then I'd get really kind of like that old blood where it was like it's browner, it's very minimal, that type of spotting. But that would happen here and there, but it was really around the time when it was close to getting my next round again. So my body would kind of be like, hey, like we're coming to the 3 months, like, but that would only happen very, very rarely.
yeah. So you went about a decade without like a full
Hmm.
bleed.
Yes, yes, yeah. And I know now they're coming out with the advertisements that it's being linked to brain tumors and things like that. So honestly, I know with a lot of things, especially in here in America, a lot of the things we consume or use linked to health problems, unfortunately. So I'm like, listen, you win some, you lose some. I was doing what was best for me at the time, and we'll cross that path if we get there. But it is scary to hear, of course, like getting to that point where you're like, oh, I was on this for almost a decade. Like am I okay? Am I gonna be okay?
Yeah, I was on this for a decade. My doctor told me it
Hmm.
was safe. Everyone in my life told me that it was the responsible thing to do.
Yes. Hmm.
I've never gotten the Depo shot, but back in the day,
Hmm.
I tried many different types of pills. I've had 3 different IUDs. I've been
Mm.
on my own little journey, tried a patch briefly, but I couldn't get it to
Yes.
on. Uh, and yeah, like the rhetoric really was, if you want to be safe, if you want to be a
Hmm.
responsible person, like you need to get on birth control. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was the messaging that
Yeah.
I received. And I've always considered myself to be quite responsible, very type A. And so I was like,
Yes.
wow, that's what I'm gonna do. And then it wasn't until I was older and various things were happening that I was like, wait, is this what I want to be
Hmm.
in my body?
Hmm.
Was that
Yeah.
kind of what inspired you to stop getting the Depo shot?
Hmm. So for me, it's because I wanted my first kid no later than 26.
Mhm.
So being 25, I was like, okay, I have to get off the depot, let my body get back to normal before I even try and have a child. Because even if I am, because obviously there's the worry about fertility issues because you never know one, if I was going to have fertility issues in the first place, but adding a birth control method in that you were on for almost a decade, that's obviously a concern that's come to my mind. But either way, I wanted to be able to give my body time to go back to normal before getting off birth control and then just trying to jump into pregnancy. And my body is like, I didn't even have time to get back into like a normal rhythm. So yeah, that was why, because I'm like, okay, it's getting to the time. I'm ready to have kids soon. I want my body to have that break in between.
I love that. Yes, I wish more people were aware of this, of like this, the time in between, the sacred
Hmm.
pause of like, I'm going to get off of the hormonal contraception and let my body do what it needs to do before I start
Yes.
that journey of fertility. Because pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, this is a marathon. It will push
Hmm.
you to your limits. You want to go in as healthy as you can.
Yes.
And like you were saying, if there's any underlying issues with the cycle, hormonal birth control covers it up. So you don't really know. Like, even if there is an issue,
Hmm.
you're not really able to address it on hormonal birth control. So I'm excited
Yes.
you had
Yes.
your cycle shifting change. You said some significant cramping with the first cycle. Was that something you were
Yes.
from when you were before you went on Depo?
Yes, yeah, actually, I was starting to get more severe cramps. They weren't terrible, but I do remember when my sister was a teenager, she had pretty bad menstrual cramps. She is actually my half sister. So, I don't know if there's a full connection there. I obviously assume so because we have the same mom, but she had pretty bad cramps where she'd be in bed crying, like wouldn't want to go to school or work or anything. And when I got on the Depo shot, I was like, oh, thank God. Like, I don't have to deal with that. I don't want to go through that. And they had started to get bad right before I had gotten on the Depo. So I was thankful, but I do remember it starting to get where I was like, oh, like this is a little more rough than I'd want it to be. So yeah, definitely was a bit of a throwback.
Yeah. And now you're in a space too where it sounds like you have more knowledge of holistic health, of wellness,
Hmm.
and of the tools at your disposal for working with painful periods. I see the cycle really as like our body communicating with us. Like, what do we
Hmm.
need more of? What do we need less of? And with cramping, it's often like, okay, where do I need to slow down? Where do I need to nourish myself? And then, like, how is my detoxification? Because, like, if your
Hmm.
liver isn't detoxifying things in the way that it should, your body's going to reabsorb all of your estrogen, leading to
Hmm.
estrogen dominance with painful periods, clots, you name it. Or, is there something else going on that's causing the discomfort? It's not like we're just in
Yeah.
pain to be in pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a communication,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
there's a lot.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing for me where I want to use more holistic methods rather than I'm not a huge medicine person anyways. Like I always tell people I don't get sick often. And I think it's because I started taking vitamins and being a little more healthy. I'm still pretty bad with the foods I eat. I'm like, we're all gonna leave this earth eventually. I want to enjoy it. Like I want to
Your life.
enjoy, yeah, I want to enjoy my foods, but um I often tell people when I'm sick, I don't take medicine unless it's like prolonging. I'm like, okay, why isn't this going away? I drink kombucha and things like that. Like, I prefer to reach for holistic methods for pain and cleansing of the body and when you're sick and things like that, rather than going straight towards medicine. And Western medicine's great. Obviously, we need it for a lot of things, but that's not my first approach. So yeah, when I was on my birth control, every time I would go past like a pregnancy video or a period video, and they were giving like holistic methods. I was like, I'm saving this for later because I'm gonna need
Mhm.
it. And then I came back to it and I'm like, oh, thank God, this is gonna help. So hopefully, that's not gonna be, I'm not gonna have the painful periods.
Yes, it sounds like you're on the right path. You mentioned the red raspberry leaf tea.
Hmm.
Anything that you can do to lower overall inflammation in the body is great. And then lately,
Hmm.
I've just been talking to anyone that will listen about vaginal steaming. Is this a practice you're
Oh,
familiar
I've heard of that. Yeah.
with? Vaginal steaming, it involves, boiling a pot of medicinal
Hmm.
herbs and you sit over it and you let the steam soften and relax the tissues of the vulva,
Hmm.
vagina, and sometimes even up to the cervix. And it's
Yeah.
very supportive for painful periods, irregular periods, brown bleeding. And
Oh,
it's
that
just my
sounds
favorite thing in
good.
the whole world to do.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I've definitely heard of it and I'm like, oh, I might try that one day because it sounds relaxing. Like it sounds like it's just gonna, and you don't really have to do much. You just sit there and let what the herbs need to
Mhm.
do, and then you're like, and then you probably walk out feeling brand new. You're like, this is great.
Yep, yep. I do it at home. When I have clients who are doing it, we set them up at home with a little steam stool and a
Oh,
blanket, and yeah. I mean, you can do what you want with that time. You can
mhm.
put on a guided meditation. You can visualize
Yes.
and journal. You can edit a podcast video.
You're right.
You can write an email. So many different things
Yes.
during that time. But I want to shift gears, and I'm sure that we'll come back into the world of fertility and cycles. But it seems like
Hmm.
art, the tool of manifestation, is something that is really central in your work. What got you into,
Yes.
hold you towards manifestation?
Mhm. Yes, so I did start what I call my spiritual journey. Early in teenagehood, I started to get into those things more, discover those things, YouTubers, things like that. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I was really intrigued and I was like, I want to learn more. And then eventually I was like, oh, I can use this to change my life, to make things different because for me, I didn't have the worst childhood, but I had a bit of a rough childhood with some emotional distress and growing up. And I was like, I want to change. I don't want to live like this. I don't want this struggle. I don't want the emotional distress. And I definitely don't want that to carry on to my children. I want to heal for myself and also be able to be the best parent to them. So it mainly started off with that, where I was like, I just want to feel better. I want to feel good. I want to be a good mother to my children when I have them. And that's actually something that I went through depression for 3 years as a teenager. And part of what pulled me out was remembering my future children. And I'm like, I haven't met them yet, but the connection's there. Like the motherly love is there. And that's what got me through it. That's what pulled me out of it because I was like, I want to have kids eventually and I want to be the best person I can be for them and they wouldn't want me to be going through this emotional distress. So that helped me get through it. But it's like I said, it started out wanting to be a better person for when I have children and just be a good person overall. I had a really negative, I would say, a pertinent figure in my life that was very negative and had a lot of negative effect on me growing up. And I never wanted to be like them growing up. So that's what got me into the manifestation and mindset work and becoming a better person. And then as I got older, as a teenager, of course, you're like, oh, like career, you think about those things and having a house and, more money. And we went through some financial struggles as well. So once I got into teenagehood, it was the desire for the career I wanted and financial stability. And that's when I really started to kind of kick off with the manifestation and things like that. So that's what I mainly use it for now is career and financial stability and manifesting those things because I believe we all have the power to change our lives. And of course, taking action steps. We call it inspired action. That's important because we live in a three-dimensional reality. You have to have the physical, but the mindset is huge too. So I know sometimes people can get a bad taste in their mouth with manifestation because sometimes you'll hear things where maybe it's not meant that way, but it can come off where it's just, oh, like think and you can make it happen and no action, or someone's really trying to portray that message. But manifestation is really the mindset work and the physical action that you take. So I love it. It's amazing. And once you do get that first like actual physical manifestation that comes into your life, you're like, oh my God, like this works. This is crazy. Like I did it.
You did it. Yeah. That moment of like, holy moly, like I
Hmm.
dreamed it, I visualized it, I, did all these things, and now it's
Yes.
real. It's mine. It's mind blowing. And I feel like manifestation has become like a very trendy word in the new agey community. And sometimes I feel like it is done or spoken about in ways that I don't agree with. But if we're like, what's a simple explanation of what manifestation is?
Yes. So I would definitely say manifestation is, the visualizing and the imagining. You really have to put yourself in that dream reality that you want. So you have to be able to put yourself there, feel the emotions. And sometimes that can be hard for people, like the smelling the smells and visualizing the senses, feeling the touch. But I would say it's really putting yourself there and doing the work. Because if your mindset and your action have to meet each other on the same plane. If they're not, if one's up here, one's down there, vice versa, it's not going to work out. They have to meet each other at the same level, the same energy level, and be on the same page. So I would just say that visualization and the action plans is manifestation for sure.
Mm. And do you believe that you can manifest anything? Or is manifestation something that you can do to bring about the desires of your soul? And before I have you answer that, I want to give a little bit more context to this question. As
Hmm.
something that I think about a lot in my life is that I have these what I'd call like human desires of like, I want a busload of money, but my soul wants
Right.
impact. My soul wants stability,
Hmm.
safety. Um, and sometimes that can come through as a busload of money. But so my
Hmm.
question is like, are we ever blocked from manifestation because something that we're trying to manifest isn't actually what we want on a soul level?
Hmm. I would say yes, because I know sometimes I feel like I can have beliefs that seem contradicting, but it's to me, it's yes and.
Hmm.
Like, yes, and because essentially, like you said, there might be something you're trying to manifest that doesn't fit your soul's desire. And I will always tell people, clients, my listeners on my podcast, like sometimes you want something, but you get it in a different way. And you're like, wait, this is more fulfilling. Like, I didn't realize this is what I wanted. And sometimes, like you said, like we might want a busload of money, but maybe that's not the stability we're really looking for. Maybe we need more stability in ourselves or the relationships around us or our environment. Maybe, yes, the busload of money would be nice, but maybe you're just wanting to not have to struggle for groceries or struggle to pay your bills or struggle to go out and have fun because you're like, I don't have the money. Like I have to miss out on these opportunities and these memories and experiences because I don't have the money. So sometimes it's just that we want the stability. And yes, the extra money, we would all love to be rich and to be able to buy whatever we want. But sometimes we just want to feel like we can breathe. And oftentimes I do think that the human desires, as you said, don't really align because we can get our judgment can get clouded and our perception can be uh, I want to say contaminated is a good word because obviously we grow up with society seeing certain things, the advertisement. I don't know if anybody knows about neuromarketing. Sometimes they also just know how to get into your brain and like make you want something that's not really meant for you. And then, of course, things we consume, like food and things, can make you have different cravings or parasites, a whole thing. There's a lot of things that can kind of distract us from what we truly want. So I definitely think that sometimes our human desires aren't actually what we want compared to our soul's desires.
Hmm. And that reminder of marketing, yeah, like we're told to want a lot of things. We're told to, I feel like I was told to want like a stable job and a husband and a house. And as I got older, I was like, do I actually want those things? Or is that what I was told to want?
Like, do I get these
Yes.
things and then I'll be happy? And that's not even marketing so much to say as like a societal guidance. But then, yeah, we're marketed to constantly of like, oh, I want this device, I want this clothing thing, I want all of these things. Um, and it's helpful to have this mindset of simplicity, minimalism, and then having practices that get you in touch with your soul. Because it's like, oh yeah, this is me.
Yes.
And for me, those practices are like journaling, dancing,
Hmm.
swimming, time in nature. I work with ceremonial cacao a lot for like guided visualizations and sound baths and yoga.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. What are some of the activities that you encourage people to do or that you do personally to get in
Mhm.
touch with their soul and their true essence?
Hmm. I definitely agree with, of course, the meditation. Even if it's hard for you, sometimes you just need a guided meditation, or if guided meditations don't seem to be working, try on your own, maybe. And oftentimes, a lot of people worry that like, the extra chatter in their brain starts going on different directions. They're like, oh no, like now I'm getting off track. That's really what meditation is. A lot of the time is letting your brain go to where it needs to. And I mean, as we know, I don't remember how many thoughts they say we have a day. I know it's like a lot. It's a lot. I want to say it's like 50,000, but it might be more or less. But we have a lot of thoughts, and your thoughts will start to go off to something that may be needed, or something you might be start thinking about, like, oh, you're meditating, you're like, oh dang, like I have to put that laundry away. And you're like, oh no, I'm getting off track. But if you keep going with those thoughts and just letting it flow, there might be a realization there somehow. Like you might lead off into some thoughts, like, because our thoughts go into some crazy things. Like you might think of laundry and then somehow you start thinking about the dog needs to go to the vet. Like, you can jump to a lot of different things. So meditation's a good one. I think journaling's great, especially if you're someone who likes to write or gets emotions out better that way. Because I know personally for me as a kid, I love to write. That's not always the best for everyone. Sometimes you need to speak it out loud. So if you need to like have a rant by yourself in the car, or at home, or into a forest, a void of a forest, and no one's around and they can't hear you, then that's good. A lot of things that kind of allow release. I'm big on, I know for me, I like to get a lot of energy and emotion out or from music. So, like you said, like dancing and things like that. If you have a big connection to music, I always say, because there's certain artists and certain songs where it brings out an energy in me. And it's just like there's something about certain instrumentals or the words or the way their voice sounds, the tone, the melody. If you are someone who works best with music, I would say music or dancing is a good one to really kind of hone in. And I know sometimes I get realizations with listening to certain songs or certain types of music. Of course, showers are a big one. So I know a lot of people love a good shower or a good bath, a good bubble bath. So that's a good one
Mhm.
if self-care is more your thing. So I like things like that. I don't know if you're aware of EFT tapping. Have you ever
Mhm.
heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I do like EFT tapping. It kind of really hones me into a certain energy. So EFT tapping is a good one if you haven't tried that. I know it can feel a little silly, but start off with like a 5-minute one, watching a video of someone doing it to kind of dip
So,
your toes in here and there. But those are powerful. I love those. And also, I mean, if you just need to um, bounce ideas off a loved one that you can really trust. That's also a good method if you're not really into more of the woo-woo spiritual methods, or those don't seem to work with you. Because sometimes, I mean, sometimes you need to do something that's kind of in the 3D and also get maybe another opinion that you trust, or just sometimes, of course, two heads are better than one. So that might help you get some realizations or pull some much needed things that you might not have realized on your own.
yeah, those are all wonderful activities for general like self-care as well as getting in touch with your soul, which I think is self-care, like getting back in touch with that eternal part of
Yes.
you. And you mentioned during meditation, like the mind likes to jump around. So I'm a
Hmm.
meditation and yoga teacher. I had the great
Oh, yes.
privilege of living in India for almost a year and
Cool.
like studying different meditation techniques.
Hmm.
I actually learned at that time that most of the roots of manifestation do come from Hinduism and from various parts of the yogic tradition. This idea of cultivating the mind.
Hmm.
So there's so many different types of meditation, and I feel like this comes up with manifestation work. I feel like this comes up in yoga all the time. But yeah, one of the most common things that I hear is I can't get my mind to be quiet. And
Hmm.
that's not necessarily the intention. So you were describing almost like a free moving meditation where it's like, I'm going to follow my thoughts where they go. Or
Hmm.
one of the more common types of meditation are I'm going to focus on one thing, whether that is my breath, whether that is a mantra, whether that is, a tree that I'm looking at. And when
Yes.
my mind wanders, I'm going to invite it back to that one pointed point of focus with the intention of training your brain to focus
Hmm.
and not clearing the mind, but slowing the waves of the mind, noticing
Hmm.
the waves, not judging the waves. But as we slow the waves of the conscious mind, then we start to get into the subconscious mind.
Yes.
I'm curious, what is the role of the subconscious mind in manifestation?
Hmm. And I did want to mention before we jump into that, I love that form of meditation, focusing on that one thing. I know that works well for me personally. I love that one. So that is amazing. But yeah, the subconscious mind is a huge part of manifestation because our conscious mind, sometimes what we think we know in our conscious minds or are aware of, and vice versa, aren't what's happening in the subconscious mind. So we'll think, oh, like the example we mentioned earlier, like I want a busload of money. Consciously, that's what we want. But subconsciously, you just want the stability. You just want to be able to buy things here and there that you enjoy and to be able to pay your bills without worrying, have it on auto pay. Like that's what you want. And oftentimes, our subconscious mind also has a lot of the limiting beliefs or traumas or things that we really need to get to the root problem of. That's going to be stored in your subconscious mind oftentimes. And a lot of things that we're not aware got stored in there is going to be there. So you might think consciously, you might have a situation where, say, you have attachment issues in a relationship, and you think, oh, I think this stemmed from this part of my childhood. But actually, in your subconscious is stored a time a few years back before that that actually caused your attachment issues. And oftentimes of course, the subconscious mind is a little more hidden. It's like something that's kind of hidden in a vault. It's in that safe, it's in that bank vault that is a little hard to get into, and we just have to be able to get in it, crack the code or know the code or whatever. But it's that deeper part within you where oftentimes it's things are kind of hidden behind that vault or curtain. And it's a huge part that plays into manifestation because we need to be able to train our subconscious mind. That's where a lot of the shifts happen, both physically and in your mindset, is when you can actually train your subconscious mind, because our conscious mind is a little bit more impressionable and it's going to have those surface level things. But that subconscious mind is where we do most of the work with manifestation for the shifts, both physical and with your mindset.
Mm-hmm. I have a teacher who says that, about 5% of our actions are actually controlled by our conscious mind, and
Hmm.
95% of our actions are being influenced heavily by this subconscious mind. The thoughts that
Yes.
we're not even fully aware of, but are in the background of our programming, beliefs that
Hmm.
we have absorbed and tucked away to really, it often comes down to safety. Things that we learned
Yes.
early on that we needed to do or believe to keep ourselves safe.
Hmm.
And a big part of the spiritual journey is beginning to unpack, like, what is it that I believe? Do I want to keep this belief, or do I have some evidence where I can disprove it and maybe adopt new beliefs? Like, that is a
Yes.
process. It doesn't just like happen. And sometimes, the deeper that you get, and EFT was really helpful for me in this, like
Hmm.
saying
Yeah.
beliefs out loud and like tapping and moving the energy, and then being like, wow, this is a really interesting thing to say out loud because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Oh, so interesting. And yeah, I love this idea that manifestation cultivates power from our subconscious mind. And with my experience with with manifestation, there's a lot of repetition, whether it's visualizations or mantras or
Yeah.
practices, but like you're doing that repetition to train the subconscious mind to
Hmm.
attract whatever this is to you. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, we definitely want to be able to impress the subconscious mind. And I know for me, a lot of coaches, life coaches, or podcasters who are in the spiritual world or self-improvement, a lot of them will get NLP certification, the neuro-linguistic programming, and a lot of those techniques are helpful for being able to kind of bypass the conscious mind a little more and impress the subconscious. And like you said, it's difficult. It's a process and you have to have that repetition because otherwise it's not going to work. And there's going to be moments where it's difficult, both mentally, emotionally, especially it can exhaust you sometimes, but you just have to keep at it. And it's definitely important to be able to make an impression on that subconscious mind. You just kind of got to worm your way through the security system to get to that space and actually make the difference. And once I feel usually when people have those moments where something like clicks and they're like, oh, like it makes sense or it's different, that's when you kind of have evidence that you've impressed the subconscious mind and that mindset shift has taken place. And then you just watch the beauty unfold. The manifestations are going to start rolling in.
I love that. Uh, so in my work, people come to me normally for one of three things, but I want to focus on the first two. They
Mhm,
either want to get pregnant or they
mhm,
want to not be pregnant.
mhm.
They want one of those two things. And so I'm curious if someone came to you and they're like, I am actively trying to get pregnant, it's not happening. How can you help
Mhm.
me manifest this? What would you say?
I would definitely say so. Of course, the journey is going to be different for each person, because for each of us, there's certain things that go into it. Of course, things we dealt with childhood trauma, societal beliefs that we have, and just what we've endured throughout our lifetime. So, really, you want to be able to make a precise action plan based on them. It's going to be personalized and individualized, but for a general, you want to be able to, like we said, we discussed, we're going to want to bypass that conscious mind because what's probably keeping you from being able to, oftentimes, yes, there's sometimes medical conditions or things like that that are truly we have to take care of with our body. So we want to have a look at that as best as we can, but of course they have to consult their doctor, physician, or someone who has certification for things like fertility and, discussing those menstrual periods, things like that. But we want to be able to kind of have a look at those to see if, okay, is there anything you might be doing that's not beneficial physically? But mainly, we want to be looking at that mindset because you might have societal beliefs that are limiting you. You might not even realize there's beliefs that you are holding on to that don't benefit you or are detrimental or aren't your own. So, for instance, maybe a woman wants to get pregnant and maybe her and her partner have discussed had conversations and they've kind of like tried not really wanted to blame each other, but maybe unintentionally or intentionally put the blame on each other. And that might be the block that's happening where you feel like something's wrong with your body or something's wrong with your partner's body. And maybe that's kind of creating a block there. So it could be something like that. We just want to dive into what the beliefs truly are that might be holding you back, where the blocks can be. And again, we're going to want to impress the subconscious mind. So we're going to, of course, find those personalized exercises and things like that to get to that root cause. I know for me personally, with my clients, I like to figure out their learning style early on. So I like to ask them, how do you learn best? Because that kind of helps with getting those personalized activities. Because like I said, everyone's different. I know I learn like hands-on. I like to do things hands-on, and some people like to watch, or some people need to listen. It just depends. But we're gonna have a look at those. And then it's the same thing. If you don't want to get pregnant, do you have beliefs that are kind of, freaking you out? You're like, oh my gosh, like, you might be getting more in your mind of like, I might end up pregnant, and you might just be freaking yourself out. You might be freaking yourself out a little bit more. And really, we just need to take a breath, and figure out methods to put in place to help to make sure that you don't really have that situation occur. And you can find what works best for you. Like for us, we discussed holistic methods. We prefer that. If someone prefers Western medicine, then okay, consult a doctor, see what options you have. But it really comes down to the mindset where we freak ourselves out and we have to dive into those steps and also then creating action plans. So really that's the bulk of what you do with manifestation in general. But like I said, you have more detail and personalization once you get to talk to someone about it and figure out what steps work best for you.
Hmm. And I feel like with those who are trying to avoid pregnancy, they can
Mhm.
fall really quickly into the trap of fixating on what it is that they don't want. They don't
Yes.
want to be pregnant. And so I have to work
Mhm.
with people. I'm like, let's visualize
Yeah.
your period coming. Like, let's
Mhm.
visualize that sensation of like, we're starting the cycle over again. And instead of saying, I don't want to be pregnant, redirect it.
Mhm.
What is it that you do want? Do you want to sleep in on the weekends? You know,
Yes.
you want to have time with your partner? Do you want to,
Mhm.
like, what is it that you're saying yes to, as opposed to getting super fixated on pregnancy? Because one
Yes.
thing I heard a while back, and I'd be curious your insight into this, but the brain doesn't really get like yes and no. It knows that you're focusing on something, whether it's something you
Mhm.
don't want or you do want. Is that,
Yes.
yeah, how does that play into your views or your work?
Yes, no, that is 100%. It's a huge thing. I hear a lot of coaches and online podcasters talk about in the spiritual world and the self-improvement world. And it's something I've discussed on my podcast too. It's a huge mindset shift to not focus on what you're not wanting. Like you said, that's really where we manifest in what we don't want because you're focusing on that so hard that you actually bring it in. Energy attracts energy, like attracts like. The energy is going to go where attention goes. The kind of cliche quote is always energy goes where or energy flows where attention goes. And if you are focusing on that so heavily, of course you're going to manifest that in. So I believe in that 100%. It's something I um always discuss on my podcast, but also talk with my clients about is we need to shift the focus on what you do want. And it's hard. It's definitely difficult and you can lose track of it. Sometimes you'll find yourself back to thinking about that negative thing or what you don't want. That's fine. You just have to stop yourself and reroute again. Just reroute the thoughts. Let's think about what we want. Like you said, visualize the outcome you really truly want. And focusing on that helps a lot more than focusing on what you don't want. And like you said, the body doesn't really understand yes and no. Something kind of some studies I've heard is that oftentimes kind of like on the similar topic is that if you want to manifest something, sometimes also pleasure, like the pleasure you might get out from the outcome, sometimes doesn't work for people as much as pain, unfortunately. So we don't want to focus on what's negative and what we don't want, but sometimes the driving force can be what you don't want. So we don't want to focus on it, but just having that intention behind I'm getting out of this pain because sometimes it was like a study and I don't remember the numbers, but they were doing studies on people and like with some mice and everything. So they did mice and then they did studies with people. With the mice, they had like a little maze and essentially they would waft in the scent of cheese to see if they would kind of get out of the maze and see if the pleasure essentially would draw them out. They would get out eventually, but not as quickly as when they wafted in the scent of a cat. So they had that fear or that survival skill kick in where they're like, oh God, like my life is probably at stake right now. And they would get out of the maze faster. And they did the same study with people, obviously not with cheese and a maze and a
Yeah, yeah.
cat, but I can't remember entirely what it pertained to, but essentially it was making a decision based on the outcome of pleasure or the outcome of if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. So sometimes it's kind of that contradicting thing again, where I said sometimes I feel like I have contradictory beliefs, but they do go hand in hand. It's the yes and, because sometimes the driving force is going to be that suffering, that pain, that outcome that you don't want, but you don't want your focus to be on that. You
Mm.
want to know, okay, my intention is set that I'm not going to focus on this thing. Here's my focus. This is what I'm going after. This is what I'm visualizing. This is what I'm affirming every day. This is what I'm paying attention to. But I know if I don't do these things, this is what's waiting for me on the back end. So I'm going to make sure that I do the work, that I really focus in on what I want. And that's just something that might help people if they're struggling with manifestation. If you've been focusing on one or the other, on what the best outcome might be, if that's your driving force is, okay, I really want this, I want this, I want this. Yes, keep that your focus, but maybe you need to switch your intention on where it's coming from.
Mm.
Maybe you just need that reminder here and there, but we still don't want to shift our focus away from what we want.
Yeah. What you don't want can be a powerful clue into what you do.
Yes.
And I appreciate this reminder too. One of the things that I don't love in the world of woo-woo manifestation is this constant idea of like it's only love and light. You got to keep your vibes high. Like, you're doing something wrong if you're not happy and
Hmm.
enjoy 100% of the time, which is an
Right.
unsustainable belief and a
Yes.
practice to try to be like enjoy all the time.
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
I think it bypasses a huge part of the human and the spiritual experience of this like shadow work depth side, this diving
Yes.
into your beliefs and your darkness and your menstrual phase, your crone, all of these different
Yeah.
things. How do you balance out these worlds of keeping your vibes high to manifest what you want, but also not
Mhm.
spiritually bypassing?
Right. I always tell people, I tell them, and this is not even just like on the podcast or with my clients. I tell people around me all the time, I'm like, you need to feel your emotions and then move on. Whatever amount of time you need, that doesn't, if you start, like, say you're going through something emotionally, and if you sit down with yourself and say, okay, like, let me go through some time frames. If you want to think about it, like, if you want to go action oriented and logically, you want to sit down with yourself and come up with a time frame, and you sit and say, okay, like maybe you're going through a breakup, you start like coming up with some time frames, going through some options with yourself and saying, okay, I'm going through this breakup, it's really hard for me. Do I want to give myself a week? No, that seems too short. 2 weeks. Okay, that seems like a good amount of time. Do I need 3 weeks? And maybe, you never know. Maybe you need months, and that's okay. It's especially if it was a long relationship, emotions it's a lot to work through, especially depending on the severity of the situation. But if you want to sit down with yourself, create that time frame and really decide on one, especially if you're someone who is action oriented or kind of goes with things head on or logically, that might be the best thing for you to sit down and create a time frame. But you want to have that time frame where you feel the emotions, you heal through it. Like you said, the shadow work. It's really important to not ignore these things, because I know for me, I've dealt with avoidant people in my life, and I always telling them, like, it's not going to help. It's going to come back around sooner or later. You have to feel the emotions and heal through it now, because it's going to be 1,000 times harder on the back end later when it comes back up. So it's way easier and so much more, I want to say, beneficial to you to just feel the emotions as they're happening and give yourself grace. Give yourself that time period to grieve, to feel sad, to feel angry, to feel annoyed, whatever it is. And if it's like a more minuscule situation, like maybe someone cut you off in traffic and you're irritated, give yourself that 5 minutes to rant to yourself in the car, whatever you need to do, and then move on. Don't let it impact your day. But we want to give ourselves that time. I'm a huge believer of that, and I have always preached that to everybody. I'm like, no, feel the emotions. Do not try and let them go. Do not try and find a distraction. Do not try and self-destruct or self-sabotage. Feel those emotions and then move on. But we don't want to dwell on them, because that's also not beneficial to us. But yeah, I definitely am not an advocate for that message of just all love and light and feel good all the time, because it's not going to be beneficial to us. And we all come here with a purpose and a mission for our soul. And if we are just not working through those emotions, we're never going to reach it. And we're just, depending on what, each person's belief is, I believe in reincarnation. So for me personally, if you don't achieve that mission, if you don't succeed in it, you're just going to have to keep reincarnating until you finally understand and
Mhm.
get that lesson that you're meant to have before your soul can move on to, if you want to think about it like the next level. So I definitely agree. That's a huge part of manifestation and working through anything in life. You want to be able to feel those emotions, move on, and then love and light definitely is not, you can't be just love and light. And I also have always said, I tell people I'm really kind, but if you test me, the bad side can come out, and it's not a bad side. I just have boundaries. I am very assertive and communicative, and I am not one to shy away from confrontation. So I definitely am not, I'm not someone who says just love and light, because sometimes people need to be put in their place, or emotions need to be felt, or things need to be worked through. So I agree with that fully.
It's been one of my favorite things working with the menstrual cycle is this like
Hmm.
balance of like light and dark and external and internal, like moving through our own inner sensations and feelings. And it's
Yes.
a reminder of like we are both the darkness and the light, and we move
Hmm.
through phases. And yeah, I think that there is this fine line between like feeling our feeling, like distracting ourselves or moving on.
Hmm.
There's a fine line between like trying to stay positive and ignoring what we need to look at. And I can't tell
Yes.
people where that line is. It's a constant question of
Yeah.
inquiry. It's like when something comes up in my darkness, I'm like, oh, am I just like sitting in this, or am I sitting with it? Am I working with this, learning from it, integrating my
Hmm.
shadow, or am I just letting it envelop me?
Right.
And I like this idea of like setting a time and then coming back to check on it. And most
Hmm.
healing isn't linear. So it's like maybe, yeah,
Yes.
in the 3 weeks, you're like, I'm good. Like I can move
Hmm.
on. I can start to integrate the practices that redirect my focus. And then, 6 months later, 3 moons later, four menstrual
Yeah.
cycles later, it comes back up and it's like, okay, I need to work with this energy again.
Yes.
But I'm not going to let myself be swallowed in it forever. It's for a set
Hmm.
amount. It's like it's for a container of time. It's for
Yes.
a ceremony. It's for a journaling exercise. It's for however long I need to sit with it.
Yes. No, I love that. And I love that you said that we're both light and darkness at the same time, because oddly enough, it's perfect timing. I'm actually doing like an exclusive podcast series, and that's kind of the whole theme, where I am telling them to step into the dark feminine, because sometimes what you need in empowerment is to step into that dark feminine energy, that shadow side, because oftentimes, like, if we are trying to be mostly love and light or all love and light, we might be letting people walk all over us, or we're not taking care of ourselves the way we should. Maybe we're not giving ourselves enough time and grace and space, especially like in terms of like a menstrual cycle, or if you are going through a pregnancy journey. You don't want to overexert yourself, you don't want to overextend yourself if you're not feeling up to it. So sometimes you have to, put your foot down with things, step into that dark feminine, and allow her to take over sometimes and be like, no, this isn't what's right for me, either in this time period or in my life or in this situation. And it was just funny you said that, because I'm like, oh, that's odd timing, because literally what I'm working on at the moment is all about that. And I had said in, I believe, the first episode, I had said, we are both light and shadow at the same time. So it was almost similar.
Mhm. We are. And I mean, that shows up in so many different philosophies and
Hmm.
histories. And I've always loved working with the goddesses from
Yes.
religions and through Hinduism and yogic philosophy. Not so
Hmm.
much yogic philosophy, but more of the Hinduism culture. There's the Kali Ma aspect.
Uh-huh.
Is that something that you're pulling in for this journey, or that you're familiar?
No, what is it?
Okay, so Kali Ma, the
No, it
goddess
sounds
of Kali,
intriguing.
is the goddess of
Uh-huh.
darkness, death, and destruction.
Okay.
And she is a very intense energy and one that I have worked lovingly for years and years and years. I'm not right now
Mhm.
in my like J. Kali Ma phase.
Mhm.
But when I think of shadow work, when I think of going into the depths and the darkness, I'm like, oh, that's some Kali energy. So I'll send you some.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I'd love to dive in. That sounds good. I know, and actually, because I know you had mentioned it earlier, that is, I don't, what is I can't remember the term for it. I don't know if it's, I don't want to say the wrong one. I don't know if it's agnostic, where you take teachings from many different religions. I can't remember, but I'm not necessarily like I say I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, but I like teachings from a lot of different religions. And I know Hinduism and Buddhism I love for sure. I've more back in my day, that makes me sound old, but like back in my day, I had dived into it a little bit more, but I loved some teachings from Hinduism and Buddhism. I just think it's beautiful. And I think every religion has its good parts, you know. I think you can find at least one thing in each religion, no matter how bad it is, they have at least one principle that, because I don't think anyone's completely bad or evil. But yeah, I'm the person, I don't know if anyone listening happens to know the word for it and is screaming it. They're like, it's this word, or if it is agnostic. But yeah, I Hinduism and Buddhism is just they're beautiful. They're beautiful.
Mhm. I agree with this ability. I'm now at a place in my life and my spiritual journey after
Hmm.
having a religious upbringing and not being religious now. I'm at a point where I can look at different religions and find bits and pieces that I really admire and that call to me.
Yes.
And I feel like the concepts of manifestation, they don't use that word, but they show up in a lot of different religions of this
Hmm.
focusing of energy, of cultivating the subconscious mind towards something, uh,
Hmm.
and really like bringing in these desires. And sometimes through religion, we do it through some sort of an external deity.
Hmm.
The New Age kind of uh, ideas more through like the higher self or like the power that is me, or the universe. But this, yeah, like I appreciate this belief in something greater than just me and how that shows
Yes.
up. And
Yeah.
I think that the ideas of manifestation are more or less universal. They show up
Yes.
across
Yes.
cultures, across times, across religions.
Hmm. Yes, I agree. And when you were saying that, the thing that came to me is in a lot of religions or teachings, spiritual teachings, you'll often hear we are all one. And I think that's what it always comes back to, is that somehow all these things are always linked together. And it's it's insane sometimes to think about, but it's also like, of course, like, and it's also, I always say things are simple and complicated at the same time. We as humans are simple and complicated at the same time. Sometimes we simplify things too much, sometimes we complicate things too much, but it's again that yes and like things are simple and complicated at the same times. And I think it just is evident that we are all one message is so true when you go through a lot of teachings, or each teaching, whether it's religion or spirituality or different practices, and you see at least one thing similar in each one, you're like, this is crazy. And I mean, religion by itself, in most of them, like you said, they have a higher power or higher source that they look to. And I feel like that's evidence enough that we are all one if each religion has a god or a deity or a higher just authority or power that they look up to. I mean, it's like that in and of itself is just obvious of the that we're all connected.
We are all connected. We are one. Om Shanti
Yes.
Shanti. Just some cool hippies.
Yes, exactly.
Anna, what are some of your current deepest desires? What are you currently manifesting?
Yes, I am definitely manifesting helping people more, so more clients, because that means more people I can help. I love to help people, so that's a big one. Of course, just being able to work on my podcast more, get it out to more people. I really enjoy, making the podcast, and more abundance, more stability, both financial, relationship, career, all the things, all the areas. Um, So those are some of my deepest desires. Thank you for asking. Can I ask some of yours?
Yeah. What are my deepest desires? Impact is one that's coming through a lot that I'm
Yes.
journaling on, is just this ability to positively, lovingly impact the people around me and to
Mhm.
wield that impact with such groundedness and integrity that it continues to spread, that I am trusted with even more impact.
Yes.
Health, vibrant health is one as well. Just wanting my body to feel just alive and vibrant,
Yes.
all of this vital life force energy. Abundance, security, calling in that safety, like the freedom to do what I want with my day without
Mhm.
stress of, oh, I need to make X amount of money, or I need to, not spend money, or that
Yes.
on my mind. And then travel. My long-term goal is to move to Costa Rica. Um,
Oh.
mhm. That is, we're looking at least about 3 years out
Mhm.
right now, but that is something I'm calling in. And in the meantime, in those 3 years, calling in some really fun trips, some international travel. Um, yeah, so that's those are very resonant for me right now.
Yes. Ah, those are exciting. And Costa Rica, I have to visit. I haven't been, but it sounds beautiful. I know for me, I've gone to Puerto Rico and I'm obsessed. I'm like, I need to move there. So I'm like, should I manifest that? Do I want to move there? Because it is just beautiful. I think uh anywhere, with the tropical, the islands, anywhere that has that, it's just beautiful. And especially to be able to experience different cultures, it's amazing.
Hmm. Oh, it's good stuff. I've never been to Puerto Rico, but I've heard gorgeous things. And yeah, Costa
Yes,
Rica has been a space in my
it
life
is beautiful.
I keep gravitating back to. I've lived there for short amounts of time,
Yes.
visited many times, and it's just one of the places that my soul keeps gravitating back to.
Yes, that's beautiful. I don't know if you've ever heard of, oh, I can't remember the exact term for it. Part of me wants to say landlines. Basically with your birth chart.
Photography.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes. Where did you ever look that up to see if Costa Rica was an area for you?
I have looked it up, and Costa Rica was not.
Oh,
But a few other
okay.
places came
That
up
is
that were.
surprising.
Mhm. Astrocartography is wild and fun, and I enjoy it.
I know. Puerto Rico wasn't one of mine, sadly, but I mean, if the magic calls us, then it's got to be there, at least for a short period of time.
Exactly. I believe in the magic.
Exactly.
Treyana, are there any final thoughts or tips, or things that you'd like to share with us before we get into your current offerings?
Um, really, I feel like we dove into most of it. I would just say be authentic to yourself and follow the emotions, the pings of emotions that you feel. They're guiding you to where you are meant to be, what is aligned for you and what you truly want. So don't ignore them, don't push them to the side, and just look for things that fulfill you and empower you. That's really what I'd say.
Gorgeous. And what are you offering in the world?
Yes, so currently I have my one-on-one coaching container, and essentially it's called Free Your Mind. And we work together for 3 months closely. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we get that personalized action plan and we discuss what works best for you, your learning styles to shift the mindset. And we just work through whatever area or areas in your life that you're looking to transform. And we devise that action plan and we start work and we get to work and transform that area or areas of your life so that way you can leave feeling more fulfilled, empowered, and filled with passion and purpose. Because I wholeheartedly believe and am an advocate for living a life that actually speaks to you and that you enjoy to wake up to rather than one that you don't, because I know how that feels and I've been there. So that's really what I like to do, is help women transform areas of their lives so they can feel happier and feel actually fulfilled. So I have that. And then, like I said, I have that exclusive podcast series that's coming out in early November. So you'll want to kind of keep an eye out for that. It is completely free. You just have to be in the space to be able to obtain it. So you'll want to keep an eye on my social medias or the podcast. And that's currently it right now. I do have some freebies as well that you can always go on my social media to find, but we'll have some group programs and self-paced programs in the future.
Phenomenal. You're doing important, potent work, and I'm excited to see how
Thank you.
your business, your creative energy shifts, changes, and expands now that you are not on hormonal
I know.
control. I mean, your sacral chakra, your creative vortex, your womb is going through an awakening,
Yeah,
my friend. And I'm so excited to see how that manifests
I
in
know.
your business.
Me too. And I cannot wait to discuss, the fertility and menstrual side of things over on my podcast because I'm dying to have that conversation. So I'm excited for that.
Yes, me too. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom. I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you for your time as well and having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Mystic Feminine Fertility Podcast. And if you want to learn more about cycle tracking, divine feminine energy, and connecting to the goddess within, you're very welcome to visit mysticfemininefertility.com or check me out on Instagram or TikTok. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you so much for spending time with me.